The New York City bomber. Moments ago, he was charged with terrorism. Police saying he strapped a bomb to his chest and tried to kill in the name of ISIS right about 24 hours ago. This is we await a major news conference on the future of the very immigration policies that allowed an eventual terrorist into our country. Day 2 now. I'm Bill Henry. Good morning, everybody, inside of America's Newsroom. Sandra, good morning.
Good morning to you, Bill. Tuesday morning, I'm Sandra Smith. New information coming out about the attempted suicide bomber and how he managed to get into the U.S.
So the FBI identifying him, 27-year-old Akayed Allah. He lived in Brooklyn, but was originally from the country of Bangladesh.
He came to the United States in 2011 on an F-43 visa, which is a program that allows chain migration for certain relatives of U.S. citizens. His relative came to the U.S. earlier by winning a visa lottery. The White House says the president wants these policies to end.
So we know that the president's policy calls for an end to chain migration, which is what this individual came to the United States through. And if his policy had been in place, then that attacker would not have been allowed to come in the country.
Team Fox coverage starting this hour. John Roberts at the White House. Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn live on the Hill. But we start with Rick Leventhal back live in Midtown Manhattan this morning. Rick, good morning there.
Good morning to you guys. Akayed Allah, still being held in a secure hospital room, has now been formally arrested and charged in connection with yesterday morning's bombing. He's been charged with criminal possession of a weapon, support for an act of terrorism, and making terroristic threats. The Port Authority, where this attack took place, is the largest bus terminal in America, and the underground passageway where that bomb went off connects to the busiest subway station in Manhattan. That's in Times Square. There are hundreds of thousands of people who pass through these hallways and corridors and platforms every single day. So this could have been far, far worse with far graver consequences, many more people hurt or even killed, except that the device the suspect built was crude and poorly assembled. Reportedly a 12-inch pipe packed with powder and matches and a broken Christmas light connected to a 9-volt battery that fizzled but never fully exploded, burning the suspect Allah around the abdomen and hands, with the device still strapped to his body with Velcro and zip ties.
In bomb making, you want to either not make a big mistake or a lot of little ones, and it's not as easy as these instructions make it out to be, which is a good thing. Yeah. But if you look at what he attempted to make that bomb out of and what he attempted to make it into, it didn't function with the force and power that the recipe intended it to. I think what we saw yesterday was something that could have been far, far worse.
5 innocent people were hospitalized with issues including headaches and ringing of the ears. The NYPD says Ola appeared to have acted alone and was not on the Fed's radar, turning up out of the blue after being radicalized in part by ISIS videos online.
You've got people who are consumers of this propaganda, and these plots unfold where they're not necessarily working with anybody else or confiding in anybody else, and that's something we're still looking at here, where the conspiracy is within the confines of their own mind, and that's a very hard place to get to.
Ola could be arraigned as early as today in his hospital bed. We're working to confirm that as the morning commute today, much more normal than it was yesterday.
I bet. John Miller, such an authority on this topic, too, here in New York City. Thank you, Rick. Rick Leventhal, back outside today. Sandra.
Well, all right, Bill, we are awaiting a joint news conference from the Department of Justice and Homeland Security where they are expected to address yesterday's failed attack. Meanwhile, the White House is saying the president's immigration policies could have prevented this. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live on the North Lawn for us this morning. Good morning, John.
Sandra, good morning to you. And this has become a central issue for the president over the last few months, highlighted and heightened by the attack on the Greenway bike path in New York City a few weeks ago, where the president made a point of the fact that the man who was responsible for that got into the country as a result of chain migration. Now we learned that the subway tunnel bomber came in on an extended family visa, prompting the White House to yesterday renew the president's call to end illegal immigration and reform the system of legal immigration. Listen here to Sara Sanders.
This attack underscores the need for Congress to work with the president on immigration reforms that enhance our national security and public safety. We must protect our borders. We must ensure that individuals entering our country are not coming to do harm to our people, and we must move to a merit-based system of immigration.
And the president weighing in on all of this in a statement yesterday afternoon saying, quote, America must fix its lax immigration system, which allows far too many dangerous, inadequately vetted people to access our country. Today's terror suspect entered our country through extended family chain migration, which is incompatible with national security. The rest of this legislative year will be focused on tax reform, trying to get that across the finish line before the Christmas break. But, Sandra, I'm told that in the new year, the president is going to put a big push on Congress to reform our system of legal immigration and then take steps to at least curb, if not end altogether, illegal immigration.
Ambitious agenda with just 9 working days left until Christmas, John. Meanwhile, the Trump counsel now says a special prosecutor should be appointed to look into the revelations about the so-called Trump dossier.
Yeah, this was something that James Rosen brought us yesterday on our air. And I talked with Jay Sekulow, who's one of the president's outside attorneys this morning. And he said that these revelations about Bruce Ohr, who was the Associate Deputy Attorney General until he was demoted last week because of contacts he had with people involved in the so-called dodgy dossier about President Trump, plus the fact that his wife, Nellie Ohr, worked for Fusion GPS, which had commissioned that dossier, and all of the other allegations, revelations swirling around the two, demand that this be looked into further. So Jay Sekulow is saying that a special prosecutor should be appointed to look into the Department of Justice and the FBI to find out exactly what the involvement was with this dossier and Christopher Steele, who is the ex-MI5 intelligence agent from the UK, which sparked all of this, which then led to the investigation into President Trump by the FBI and brought us to where we are now with the special prosecutor Robert Mueller. Jay Sekulow told me, though, in no uncertain terms, does any of this have to do with anything regarding the Mueller investigation. He says that he and the rest of the president's attorneys and the president believe that Mueller is conducting this investigation with the utmost integrity, fairness, and professionalism. So they want to be sure that this call for a special prosecutor to look into these other items has nothing to do with the Mueller investigation. The president, by the way, also this morning weighing in on New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand's calls for him to step down after 4 women came out again yesterday and re-aired their accusations of sexual impropriety that they brought up during the campaign on the part of the president. The president tweeting this morning, quote, lightweight Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, a total flunky for Chuck Schumer and someone who would come to my office begging for campaign contributions not so long ago and would do anything for them, is now in the ring fighting against Trump. Very disloyal to Bill and crooked. Used! Exclamation point. The president has always said when he gets hit, he's going to hit back harder. And that's what he did this morning, Sandra.
And Senator Gillibrand's responding to that in the last few moments. We'll have that later on. John Roberts at the White House. Thank you.
For more on all this, and it's a lot, Tennessee Republican Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn live from the Hill. Good morning to you, and thank you
Good morning.
for coming back here. I want to go through a few things, but I'm going to start with this Christmas bomber. Chain migration is an issue, but so is this fact. He was simply offline to any and all detectives in New York City, and that is difficult to defend.
You're correct. Absolutely it is. And the chain migration policies and the immigration policies around this bill, some of us have been saying we have to clean this up. You have to look at the legal immigration policies and the effect that this has, the lottery system, the chain migration, those vulnerabilities that are seeded, if you will, into the immigration system. Also, then looking at the individuals once they are here and the associations and affiliations that they have.
Well, we'll see where that goes today. As we mentioned a moment ago, he was charged with terror just in the last hour. Alabama. What will happen in that special election today?
I do not know. That is up to the people of Alabama, and I think probably by about 8 o'clock tonight we'll all know what they've decided to do.
And what do you think it means if Roy Moore wins?
If Roy Moore wins, I think it means that the people are focused on the policies and not on the individual, and that they want to see tax reform, the repeal of Obamacare. They want to see the southern border secured. They're ready to see President Trump's agenda passed and across the finish line.
Well, on that agenda and on tax reform, look at the calendar. We are now, I mean, at the very end of the month of December. We circled the 12th. That's where we are today. The 22nd is when officially Congress expects to wrap up all of its business. Christmas Day is the following Monday, and then January 1 is the start of the new year. And if this does not get done in the next 2.5 weeks, does tax reform ever get done?
I think you're going to see us finish this before the end of the year. The conference committee is working. They're working to make certain that the individual marginal rates are as low as they can possibly be. They're working to make certain that there is fairness in the system of business taxes, both for the pass-through entities and the corporations. They are working to make certain that there is simplification so that the American people spend less money and fewer hours filing those taxes to the IRS, and my constituents are saying, I want more money left in my pocket at the end of every month, and I want less going to the federal government. That would be a win.
Times are running. Thank you
Yes,
for your
it
time
is.
today. Marcia Blackburn from Tennessee.
Thanks,
there on the
Bill.
Hill today. Thank you, Sandra.
And you can catch all of the action of tonight's special election in Alabama. Join Brett Bure and Martha McCallum as they host special coverage right here on Fox News Channel. Going to be a big night,
Yes,
Bill.
it is. Special elections are really difficult to predict. Usually the numbers are way down, but in this environment, who knows?
And we'll see who
knows
turns
what the
out,
turnout will be.
because
Correct.
turnout's going to be everything there.
If you saw the press briefing yesterday, this was something else. White House Press Secretary Sara Sanders fired up at a combative news briefing when it went like this.
When journalists make honest mistakes, they should own up to them. Sometimes, and a lot of times you don't. But there's a difference. There's a very big, I'm sorry, I'm not finished. There's a very big difference between making honest mistakes and purposefully misleading the American people, something that happens regularly.
And that was just part of it. Tension between Sanders and reporters over recent errors by reporting from certain media outlets. Our panel takes that on coming up in moments here.
And the moment of truth in Alabama. Voters head to the polls in a high-stakes and highly controversial Senate race.
We're not going to stand by and let other people from out of state and money from California control this election. We're up to our neck in alligators. We're up to the neck in people that don't want change in Washington, D.C. They wanted to keep it the same, keep their power, keep their prestige, and keep their position. And we've got to change that.
There's Roy Moore vowing now to fight the swamp. Alabama has reached decision day. Polls are now open. Special election for the Senate seat, once held by the Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The Democrat is Doug Jones. The embattled Republican is Roy Moore. The president tweeting this only a moment ago. The people of Alabama will do the right thing, he writes. Doug Jones is pro-abortion, weak on crime, military and illegal immigration, bad for gun owners and veterans, and against the wall. Jones is a Pelosi/Schumer puppet. Roy Moore will always vote with us. Vote Roy Moore. Byron York, chief political correspondent, Washington Examiner, Fox News contributor. You've analyzed this thing for weeks now. Byron, good day to you.
Good morning, Bill.
Here is part of Doug Jones' closing argument from late on yesterday.
The majority of the people of Alabama say that it is time that we put our decency, our state, before political parties.
So now it is in the hands of the voters in a deep red state, and there are political reasons for why this is important, and there are policy reasons. Take the political first, Byron.
Well, on the politics, it would be a huge deal if a Republican, backed by President Trump, lost in a state that is so deeply red and so deeply pro-Trump as Alabama. That would be an absolutely huge development. And right now, we just absolutely have no idea exactly what is going to happen, because in the last two polls, one had Roy Moore ahead by 9 points, and the other had Doug Jones ahead by 10 points. It's really impossible to say right now which one of those is correct.
How about the policy? What is the big policy reason as to why this is so critical?
Well, the big policy reason is that it has been hard enough for Republicans in the Senate to pass their agenda with 52 GOP votes. It would get a lot harder with 51 votes. Remember, in the Obamacare fight, it was impossible for Republicans to pass a repeal and replace bill with those 52 votes. Just imagine if they had 51. It would also make the Republican moderates like Susan Collins, John McCain, Lisa Murkowski more powerful, because Mitch McConnell could only lose one of them and still pass a bill through the Senate with just Republican votes.
There could be some amazing analysis tomorrow, and it could go either way. Now, you say at the last minute Democrats became fired up about this race. Why the change? What did they smell in the water in Alabama?
Well, I think there were two things. They saw the actual possibility of winning, which would be huge because, you know, Republicans have won all of the special elections to fill House seats that were vacated by lawmakers who went into the Trump administration. I think the other reason is the sort of momentum of the Me Too movement about women and sexual harassment. It's gotten to be such a hot topic. So many men have been accused. Obviously, a number of Democrats have come into Alabama, accused Roy Moore of being a pedophile, a child molester. That's gotten Democrats, I think, very excited. The question is how it plays with voters in Alabama.
So true. Special elections are hard to handicap. You
Absolutely.
agree with that. Maybe there's a big turnout, maybe there's not. But if Republicans vote, Roy Moore probably wins.
Well, the bottom line is there are just a lot more Republicans in Alabama than there are Democrats. So Roy Moore has to get all of those Democrats out, and then he has to get a lot of Republicans to change their party loyalty for this election, at least.
Thank you, Byron.
Thank you, Bill.
Interesting evening this evening. Byron, New York, and D.C., thanks. Sandra, what's next?
Republicans facing a make-or-break moment in their push to unite behind a tax reform bill to send to the president's desk before the end of the year. Some key lawmakers still on the fence. We will talk to Chris Stirewalt just ahead. Plus, new concerns over out-of-control wildfires in California. We are live on the ground next.
I've never even imagined that this was going to ever happen to us, that this would come this close to us. And so many people have lost their homes all up and down the coast. It's frightening.
It is 23 past the hour, happening now on Capitol Hill. About 60 female Democratic lawmakers now calling for the House Oversight Committee to investigate President Trump over allegations of sexual harassment. In the letter to Chairman Trey Gowdy and the ranking Democrat Elijah Cummings, they write this. Members of Congress have also come under scrutiny and investigation, with some resigning for improper sexual conduct. We cannot ignore the multitude of women who have come forward with accusations against Mr. Trump, they write. Now, when questioned, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders pushing back, saying that voters have already heard these claims about a year ago and they made their decision last November.
The president has addressed these accusations directly and denied all of these allegations, and this took place long before he was elected to be president, and the people of this country had a decisive election, supported President Trump, and we feel like these allegations have been answered through that process.
We'll follow the press conference from the Hill. The president tweeting this just a short time ago, slamming the Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who was in part leading this charge from the Hill. The president says this: lightweight Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, a total flunky for Chuck Schumer, and someone who would come to my office begging for campaign contributions not so long ago and would do anything for them, he writes, is now in the ring fighting against Trump. Very disloyal to Bill and crooked used. Senator Gillibrand responding also on Twitter. You cannot silence me or the millions of women who have gotten off the sidelines to speak out about the unfitness and shame you have brought to the Oval Office, end quote, on Twitter a moment ago. We will watch the back and forth and see where it goes from here.
Meanwhile, no rest for firefighters in California doing battle for more than a week now trying to contain a massive wildfire as it creeps closer and closer to Santa Barbara. Hundreds of homes already destroyed. Senior correspondent Adam House is live in Santa Barbara County for us with the very latest. Hey, Adam.
Hey, Sandra. In fact, you're looking at the last active leg of this fire behind me, right over my shoulder. The good news is the last couple of days, the weather has really cooperated. It's very cold up here right now, but it's still very dry. The winds have been non-existent for, again, about 3 days, which allowed firefighters to allow this part of the fire, again, the last active leg, to kind of back down these hills that are just chewing up acreage that has not burned in more than 100 years. The good news is there's been no structures lost in about 3 or 4 days. The bad news is the new numbers are in. wind. All told, in more than a week, this fire chewed up about 800 structures, destroying them, and damaged about 200 others. But again, the last few days, they have not lost or had any go down here in Santa Barbara County, again, making some incredible headway. The helicopters really hammered this part of the fire all throughout the day yesterday. They brought in planes as well. I saw at least 4 drops by C-130s that stopped another angle of this fire heading towards the Santa Barbara area. Now it's kind of, again, backing down the hills near Carpinteria. As long as it stays this way, Sandra, they're in pretty good position to keep this thing going. Now, to give you an idea, 30% containment's what they're saying right now. That doesn't mean that 70% is still burning. That means they've gotten around 30% of the area burned, and this area is massive, the 5th largest in state history. So right now it's cautious optimism. A lot of the other fires have all either been put out or pretty much completely contained. It's this fire right now that they're hoping, if the weather stays like it does right now and has the last couple of days, Sandra, tonight they're going to be in a very good position. And homes here and people here, of course, are very happy about that, Sandra.
Many will be happy to hear that. Adam Housley, thank you.
Watching this very carefully now. Back to Alabama. Moments ago, this is what we have. The Democratic candidate, Doug Jones, showing up to cast his vote in that special election. Today is the day, as you well know. What will Alabama decide? What are the implications for the outcome? Full analysis on that throughout the morning and the day here on Fox.
Plus, the charged New York City bomber entering the United States using a visa program tied to a relative already living here. The White House says these policies need to end and will end under President Trump.
So we know that the president's policy calls for an end to chain migration, which is what this individual came to the United States through. And if his policy had been in place, then that attacker would not have been allowed to come in the country.
During the commercial break, Doug Jones apparently casting his vote a moment ago, now meeting with reporters in Alabama.
First of all, I don't think we're going to get that. In Alabama, we have come so far with too many things. And there's this saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Alabama's not going to let that shame happen again.
One last question.
One more question, and I had somebody.
You just said that you don't think that that's going to happen. That is to say that the Senate would need.
I don't think that Roy Moore is going to win this election. Next question. All right. Thank you all very much. Thank you, and thank you guys.
Pretty quick and simple, Doug Jones' message. He thinks he's going to win today. Watch all this throughout the day and check out our coverage tonight in prime time. The viewership will be large. We'll see whether the turnout is large there in Alabama today. There you go. Doug Jones, more coming up shortly. Sandra.
This is a Fox News alert as we learn new details about how the accused New York City bomber got into the U.S. Federal officials saying the suspect entered the country back in 2011 from Bangladesh using a chain migration visa program. The head of Homeland Security and the Attorney General will hold a news conference on immigration reform coming up in just about an hour from now. President Trump has blasted so-called chain migration in the past and says things have to change. Here's Sarah Sanders yesterday.
The president is certainly concerned that Congress, particularly Democrats, have failed to take action in some places where we feel we could have prevented this. Specifically, the president's policy has called for an end to chain migration, and if that had been in place, that would have prevented this individual from coming to the United States.
Joining me now is former UN Ambassador John Bolton, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and a Fox News contributor. Ambassador Bolton, thanks for being here. He's now been charged with terror. There's a lot we know and there's a lot we don't know. But has the policies that this president has suggested would have stopped this man from entering this country and trying to do harm to our people?
Well, we can't say for sure, of course, but I think there are a number of policies that need to be changed, not just the so-called chain migration, but a whole range of policies to deal with the terrorist threat. The president's tried to do some. He's been blocked by the courts. In some cases, we'll see what the Supreme Court does with it. But I think it's part of a much bigger picture. It's not simply the illegal immigrants or the people who come in legally who commit terrorism. It's, in my mind, also a breakdown of the Americanization project, not just for immigrants from Muslim countries, but from all around the world, that has turn the fire down on the melting pot because some people think it violates multicultural ideals. I think it's very important, and in the case of religious terrorism like this, you know, it is fundamental to this country that everyone has a right to practice their own religion. Nobody has a right to commit terrorist acts because they're offended by somebody else's religion. And I think that that kind of basic element to Americanization needs to be stressed more, whether people come here legally or illegally.
It brings up the question how he'll be treated, Ambassador. He came here on this F-43 visa. That makes him a lawful permanent resident. How are they going to deal with this terrorist?
Well, I think it would be a mistake in the first instance to put him immediately into the American criminal justice system. We don't know whether this person came here with the intent to kind of burrow in and commit terrorist acts later. I think this goes to another fundamental problem that the Trump administration inherited, that under Barack Obama we had largely moved away from the war paradigm of dealing with terrorism toward the law enforcement paradigm. And I think this is an opportunity, among others, to go back to what I think we really face here, which is a civilizational threat against us from people like this accused.
And the president speaking very strongly on this. He's issued this statement regarding the terrorist attack in New York City yesterday morning, saying in it, quote, "America should always stand firm against terrorism and extremism, ensuring that our great institutions can address all evil acts of terror." We had our brain room, Ambassador Bolton, dig up some of the recent numbers on these chain migration visas that the president talks so much about. Here's the trend that we have been seeing. So far this year, over 466,000 have been granted. You go back to 2013, 394,000. That number has only been growing. We have been granting more and more of these chain migration visas on which this man entered this country back in 2011.
And it means that people are coming in without regard to whether we think they'd be an overall plus for American society. Look, I personally believe we should increase migration on a legal basis, but I think we should do it along the lines the president has suggested, for merit admission to the country, not simply because of family relations, certainly not because of a visa lottery program or something like that. We're in a period where we face a number of threats around the world. As I say, I think we would benefit by having more immigration and having those immigrants Americanized when they get here. But that means taking control of the immigration system and really want to need a radical reform, not just dealing with illegal immigrants, but we need a radical reform of the legal migration system as well.
We know a lot more about this man at this time today than we did yesterday. Obviously 27 years old, his name Akayed Allah, a Bangladeshi national. He was living in Brooklyn. We know that he was inspired by ISIS. This is according to law enforcement officials, Ambassador. And I wanted to ask you, because they said he was inspired by ISIS but didn't appear to have direct contact with any one particular group. We don't know where he was radicalized, whether it was here or there. So there's a lot still we don't know.
Well, I think it's highly inadvisable for law enforcement to be saying he doesn't appear to have had any contact with ISIS. How can they possibly know at this point, especially if they've given him Miranda rights or if they're about to do it soon? This process of radicalization, coordination with radical groups, the inspiration to act, is much more complex than some corporate organization chart. And I think we've got to understand why and how these various factors fit together. And it ties in part to the effect of radicalized immigrants who come into the country and affect people who have already been here, whether they're permanent residents, whether they've actually become citizens, or whatever their status is. This is a very dynamic and fluid environment, and that threat of terrorism just continues to increase.
And as far as whether or not he's been read his Miranda rights, we don't know, but we do know Senator Lindsey Graham was on here about this time yesterday, who said he should be treated as an enemy combatant. We'll see where this story goes. Ambassador Bolton, thanks for coming on this morning. Good to see you.
Glad to be with you.
Violence continues in parts of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. The latest fallout from the decision to recognize formally Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Reports of several people shot in the West Bank, even rockets being fired into Israel from Gaza. David Lee Miller's live in Jerusalem watching all of this now. David Lee.
That's right, Bill. Last night, 2 rockets were fired from Gaza into Israel. One landed in an unpopulated area. The other was intercepted. The group Islamic Jihad says 2 members of its group have been killed in Gaza. The militant group is blaming the airstrikes on the Israeli military. The Israeli military is saying that it was not responsible for any such attack. Meanwhile, as you mentioned, there were more clashes today between Palestinians and Israeli forces in Bethlehem. But overall, Bill, there have been fewer demonstrations protesting President Trump's Jerusalem declaration. Bethlehem's mayor says that no arrangements have been made to welcome the U.S. Vice President Mike Pence when he arrives in the region on Sunday. According to a published report, Palestinian officials have urged local church leaders not to meet with the U.S. VP. Prior to the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital by President Trump, Palestinian authorities were setting up meetings between local Christians and the vice president. And Bill, when the VP is here, one of the things he's expected to do is to speak before the parliament, Israel's Knesset.
Thank you, David Lee. Good to have you there in Jerusalem today. Sandra.
Well, things were tense during the White House briefing yesterday.
So I think that was pretty misleading to the American people, and I think that it's very telling that that individual had to be suspended because of that reporting. I think that shows that the network took it seriously and recognized that it was a problem.
Sarah Sanders taking that moment to slam reporters, and some of them were giving it right back. Has the American media have they gotten sloppy, or is the White House too sensitive? We will debate that.
Also, one of President Trump's outside attorneys now saying with all the new revelations we're learning about the unverified anti-Trump dossier, the time has come, he argues, for another special prosecutor. Details on what we're hearing about that today, just coming up next.